Ever wonder what sets the winners apart from the losers? And what does it really take to be a winner? My name is Federico, and I'm a young, successful entrepreneur passionate about sports, real estate, mindset, and business. If you are just like me, then the Winning Ways podcast is meant for you. Yo, welcome back to Winning Ways with Fred. My name is Federico, and I am your host. Guys, special guest for you guys here today. You guys are going to learn a bunch. You guys are going to want to share this show. And first and foremost, as always, please, guys, if you find value in the show, if you learn, which you will a lot today, or if you know of somebody that will find value in the show, please share it. I'm not going to run ads in this show. I don't like listening to ads when I'm listening to podcasts, so I'm not going to put you guys through that. And that's the way we're going to move on with the show. Now, without further ado, I have an author of over a dozen personal finance books, personal retirement books, and a gentleman that's created a retirement plan called eQRP that he's going to elaborate a bit more when we get into the conversation. A lot to talk about, a lot to learn. But without further ado, Damion Lupo, how are you, man?
Good. It's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. A lot of back and forth, but I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Me too. This is it's awesome. It's destiny. Let's do this.
Yeah, so a lot to talk about, and just so my audience gets to know what you do and what you're about, give them a little background about your personal finance stuff, your books, and your website, and how you're helping people with their retirement plans.
Yeah, a little background. I've started and run more than 60 companies over the last 20 years. A lot of real estate companies, venture capital, insurance, precious metals, a lot of different things. And it's, as an entrepreneur, it's in your blood. You're always going to have to do it. If you stop doing it, you start getting withdrawals. It's like being a junkie. But I think a lot of times people just bounce in and out of things. And the hard part as an entrepreneur is to go deep into something. And I did that in a couple of different things. One in the real estate space, where I built up a fairly large portfolio over about 5-6 years of 20 plus $1 million, and was thinking I was pretty important and pretty rich and pretty smart until 2008 happened. And then I lost 25 million in 12 months. And so I was negative 5 million, which was a humbling experience. And on the other side of that, I said, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like, who am I? What is it all about? What's the future look like? And during that period of reinvention, I wrote a book called Reinvented Life, had these conversations with therapists and coaches, and I watched my parents retire broke, playing by the rules of the system. And it really hit me that there's a big problem in the world, in America and really all over the world, where people are playing by the rules, and the system is squashing them and harvesting them and just taking advantage of them. So I thought there's got to be something I can do to help this. And that's where the eQRP came into existence. And really what this is, it's a way for people to take their retirement money that we're all supposed to have in some way. Like, our house is not going to feed us in retirement. And so it's giving people control of their money where they can invest. And the problem for most people is they don't know how to invest. And so they're more scared of it, which is why they just say no. Wall Street advisors, which are basically salespeople, they're like wolves in sheep outfits. And so the reality is it's giving people a tool and then the education to help them design a future that they can control and feel confident about. Because most people, if you give them a couple $1 million at age 55, it scares them to death. They're like, I don't want to lose this because I have no idea what I'm doing. And then they hand it over to somebody and say, please don't lose this. And it ends up being a lot of fear. And so this whole ecosystem and what's been built with the eQRP is about giving people power, control, and options. So they don't have to succumb to the Wall Street or the financial institutions. They actually get to choose their path forward. And that's what me and the team are all about.
Nice. So what differentiates it between a normal retirement plan? Because typically I started off in Morgan Stanley, and they put you in the retirement plan, the 401k, and typically you invest in ETFs primarily. They either choose or you choose, depends whichever one you want. But what do you guys do that's a little different?
Well, it's literally the opposite. So when we set up a retirement account, we give people the checkbook and the keys, and they get to choose what they want to do. And it's the only one of its kind in America, a 401k where individuals and companies, so like Morgan Stanley could set up an eQRP, and they could give all their employees the ability to invest in not just ETFs, not just stocks, but real estate, gold, crypto, private placements, a Jimmy John's shop on the side of the street, like really anything. And that's the difference. This allows you to take real money from your retirement money and invest it in Main Street, not just Wall Street. So you were in the belly of the beast in Morgan Stanley, and that whole system is about keeping money trapped inside of Wall Street's doors and their vaults and in paper assets. So what we do is we give people the ability to invest in all of the real stuff.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, and it's different, right? Has it been difficult to get people to follow your plan since mainstream media and the main thing that typically people do is follow the Wall Street guys?
Unfortunately, a lot of people are they're not unlikely the people that are listening and paying attention to you and to us this conversation. Most of the population is so exhausted, so busy, they don't think about their money, and if they start thinking about it, it scares them, so they keep it in other people's hands, the
Yeah,
advisors, the people that are just selling them more insurance and more stocks. So it's not been hard for the people that want to take control, and that's who we speak to. That's who we work with. We're not trying to get anybody to do this that is going to fight it. It's more like, hey, it's an invitation, and
yeah,
the right people come running, and the people that shouldn't be, because people ask, is this for everybody? And I say, absolutely not. This is probably for the top 3%, not the 3% richest, the
yeah.
3% that the most self-responsible people. That's who this is for.
Okay, got it. So with this plan, you would be in control of all of your investments.
You're in control of your investments. You
Okay,
literally are the one writing the checks. You're the trustee of the 401k. And
okay,
normally that's some nebulous character behind a curtain in New
yeah,
York or LA or somewhere. And
yeah,
in this case, that's actually you. You write the checks. For a lot of people, that scares them to death because there's no financial training, no literacy. And they say, I don't know how to invest. I don't know. I mean, I guess I just picked the S&P 500. So it's a different track for people where
yeah.
it's for people that say, okay, I'm going to spend the time and energy to become the one in charge of my financial life. Until
Okay,
that happens, this is the wrong plan. When that happens, this is the only plan.
okay. And is there a plan where within the company that there's help? Let's say somebody's busy, they don't know anything about investments. I know this is for people that want to take self control, but let's say a lawyer that has no idea but wants to start taking control, but needs somebody holding his hand for the first couple months. Do you guys offer that too?
Yeah, it's really a lifetime of support, and the
Okay,
support is it go there's compliance support, following all the rules, and a big part of what we do, a major part is the education. It's educating people, it's coaching and mentoring, giving people ideas and giving them resources, introducing them, sharing the network. We've got a community. The biggest core value for us is the relationship in the community. So people get to know each other
yeah,
people that are self-responsible, and then they learn from each other and they end up meeting up, and so there's it's not like you get a tool. It's like if I had a Ferrari, which was awesome. It took me a week to get arrested, and it was really dumb. It's like, this is what happens in your 20s: too much money and too little sense. And
yeah,
it's so this is basically like a Ferrari of finance. If you hand somebody the keys to a Ferrari and they have no training, they're going to crash that sucker into something. And that's really the same thing here. We give people the keys, and we're there as a navigator, as a guide, as a sage, a coach, whatever you want to call it, with a lot of support, so that people don't feel like I have no idea, and they're not scared, they're more excited. And we do a lot of mapping with their financial plan, helping them understand, because typically Wall Street says, okay, you want to retire in 30 years, here you need $4 million, you're going to make 8% a year, we're going to pull this out with inflation. Like, there's this whole BS plan
yeah.
that they give you that is actually not real, but it's a great way to pitch people and get their money trapped for 3 decades.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that how it goes?
Hmm.
It's crazy. And I mean, I feel like a lot of people are starting to catch up to that and open their eyes a little bit to that. But I want to pick on something you just talked about. My audience is primarily young men,
Yeah.
18 to 30-year-old. So when you said right there, I had a Ferrari when I was 20, that's what they're looking for. And the idea behind the podcast is in a way to help them build the habits and learn the habits and mindset and things that these certain people like yourself have done to get to the level you have, right? And you touched that you had a portfolio of $20 million and then you lost it in '08 and you were negative $5 million. How did you bounce back from that? Like, what were the processes? I'm sure you were devastated and you were in the one of the worst spots of your life.
There's a term in trading and markets called a dead cat bounce. I was like a dead cat. Hit the ground and I
Yeah,
bounced, but then I basically just came right back down and laid there.
yeah,
And I laid there for a few years. There wasn't just a bounce back. It's like I was in the timeout box for a number of years. The it, what, so many lessons. I mean, one of the ones that everyone needs to hear really loud and clear is that your net worth and self worth are not the same thing. And for most young men, the self worth is absolutely their net worth. And so when that goes up, they feel good. And when it goes down, they feel terrible. And
mm,
unfortunately, there was a guy with Bed Bath and Beyond that just jumped out of a building in New York and killed himself. I think he was the CFO. And he clearly had a lot of tie up with his self worth and net worth because his life depended on billions of dollars that were about to be vaporized. So that's one thing, to be really clear that your self worth is not a number in a balance sheet. And things like the obsession with the toys and the things. If you think you want a Ferrari, that's awesome. Go rent one for a weekend. Like go have the experiences, because if your entire life, if you're 20 or 30 years old and you're thinking, okay, my ultimate goal is to have a Ferrari or have this big house or a private jet, you know what? Do it sooner than later. Go rent that sucker and have the
Yeah.
experience. And what you'll find is that you're like, okay, that was cool. And maybe you want some more of it. What you're really going to realize is that there's something that's fulfilling that's not that shiny object. And that's what you have. As soon as you can get there, that was one of
Yeah.
my mistakes in my 20s and even into my 30s, still chasing shiny objects instead of chasing a mission, chasing something that mattered for other people. Because then every day I wake up and I can't wait to start my day versus I got to get some more money for the next shiny thing that goes way too fast. It gets me in too much trouble.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that how I see it too is certain people have to go through that though to
Yeah.
realize that those shiny objects aren't everything in life and there's more to it. Some people don't. Some people can just realize it right away. And no, it's definitely true. I feel like the self-worth is not your net worth, is not your self-worth. It's the society we live in, right? You go to high school, you go to college, you're always competing. You're trying to be the man, the guy that gets the whole girls, everything about that. So in adulthood, it translates to money, really. I mean, not always, but sometimes.
I mean, it's crazy. It's money, it's shiny objects, it's sex, it's the number
Yeah,
of conquests that you can have. Like having been through all that stuff, I get it. And you're right that you can't tell somebody. It's like when you're a kid and your parents try to tell you something and you're like, whatever, and your parents are frustrated. They're like, why can't you just hear me and understand this? Why do you have to go through it? And it's like, because I'm a human being and that's part of the process. You got to go through this stuff. You don't have to go through everything.
yeah,
Like it's insane to go through all the same mistakes. Trust me, there's plenty of unique ones you can go through. You don't need to go through all the same ones. And so
yeah,
that's part of maturing, but it's also part of the process. And one of the things that I learned was when you go through these experiences and you get your butt handed to you, none of that stuff generally will kill you.
yeah,
And if you're listening, it hasn't killed you. So the great thing is these mistakes, that's where you get the scar tissue. I always say go find a balder, grayer person to latch onto, because that's a sign of wisdom. Like when they've lost all their hair or it's turned gray, like that tells you a lot. They've gone
yeah,
through some crap. So
yeah.
that's always a good thing for anybody at any age.
Nice. And when all this happened, did you have a mentor or a mastermind group that helped you build this company and get out of the hole?
So for years, I had mentors and masterminds, and then I got to a point where I thought I was the master of all,
Yeah,
and so my ego took over, and that's it's a problem. I hired a guy in Britain that was my chairman, and well known guy named Dan Pena. You can look him up. He's the $1 billion guy, and he
nice.
at some point he was charging $10,000 a month to have like a half hour conversation, which is there's nothing wrong with that. That's great when you have the point somebody's making with a $10,000 call. You tend to take that thing and run with it.
Yeah,
The problem is at some point he was enjoying taking my money and using it for whatever he did, and he was just telling me whatever I wanted to hear. He wasn't telling me what I needed to hear. And
yeah,
that's so when you have a mentor, one of the reasons that you don't want a free mentor is because they won't tell you the thing, they won't push you. When you pay for it, you pay attention to it, and you tend to run with it. And so you need to go to a pain price with a mentor. In my opinion, you find a mentor that makes you uncomfortable with how much money you're paying them, and you pay the person that's gone through stuff that can give you the advice and the guidance. It'll accelerate everything. Literally, it'll 10x anybody if you're in the position where you're ready to listen and take action.
yeah. No, I get that. I always say that having a mentor is really important. I've had three that I've paid for coaches. Two of them kind of ended up taking my money at one point. Not taking my money, they helped me a lot, but it got to the point where there wasn't more for them to provide to me, and they tried to latch on, and I had to move on. But I think they're crucial because, for example, this moment right now, this podcast, everything wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for a mentor that pushed me and opened my eyes to the possibilities of all that. So I think they're very important.
They're critical, and I can't imagine not having a mastermind and a mentor. And I've got mentors, and it's like hiring people. When you have mentors or your people, you want to bring people into your world that are where you're going, not where you are. You don't want a mentor that makes as much money as you. You want a mentor that's making 10 or 50 or 100 times as much as
Yeah,
you are. So and it's like hiring a CFO. You don't hire a CFO for the level you are. You hire a CFO for 10x where you are to where you're going, because they understand it and they'll operate in that space, and you'll naturally you'll be pulled into that space. And people oftentimes go with whatever's comfortable. Okay, well, I'm going to have a CPA that works with people like me. That's BS. Don't do that. Go hire the CPA that works with companies that are 100 times bigger than you. So you'll start hearing different words, different ideas, and doing things differently. You won't be so scared to go hire people. You won't be scared about taking the steps that are required if you want to be financially free. And that's the stretch. And so you have to be conscious. Who the hell are you around? Who's around you?
I was about to say that right there. You beat me to it because what you just said. That's great, right? But you got to be surrounded like people like you to hear that. Because middle class people, I'm Colombian. My parents are middle class. They didn't have that mindset. And when you
No.
started the conversation saying like, "Oh, my parents got screwed planning for retirement," I hate to say it, but that's where my parents are heading right now. And it's one of those things where it's frustrating to see because my dad has busted his ass his whole life, 25 years selling cars, putting it in his 401k and all that to basically retire and still not be able to enjoy it. He's probably going to still have to work. He loves to work, but he got promised this and he's not going to get that. So it's a little frustrating on that end.
And the system sets you up to where you don't realize you have a problem until it's too late to solve the problem because you don't have time to go redo it. Like you can't wake up at 55 or 60 and go, oh, well, I need to do it differently for the next 30 years because you're dead. And
Yeah.
the entire system is meant to keep you trapped. It's like cradle to grave. Wall Street and that whole financial system is 100% meant to be the matrix where you plug in, they sap you of all your stuff, and when they're done, they liquefy you and shoot you out and bury you. That's the entire system. And if you think it's different, you're delusional. So if
Yeah,
anybody
man.
goes, no, I got a 401k, like your dad's, yeah, that's playing by the system, but the system is rigged against you. It's a casino. Like I'm looking at your
Literally.
shirt, and I was like, yeah, win. Okay, win
Yeah.
hotel and casinos. Guess who wins?
Yeah.
Win.
Yeah. The
The guy
casino,
that
man.
owns the damn place. Like
Yep.
that's who wins in these things, the owner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Most people aren't aware of that. Just yeah. Again, I do think people are waking up to that,
Yeah.
especially with everything that's been going on, all the money printing, all the manipulation, and all that. It's helped people wake up a little, I think, and I hope so, right? But we've touched on this enough. Let's talk about how you started your company. So when did you found your company? When was your company founder? Sorry.
So I've been doing this for about a decade, just over a decade. The first
Okay.
first version of the QRP book that I wrote, I came out in 2012. So the 10th anniversary, I
Nice.
came and
Congratulations.
went. Thanks. And so it was like a lot of things. In the beginning, it was an idea, and I was playing with it, and not super serious, but thought it was kind of interesting. And then at some point, got really serious and started bringing in people. And because what I realized is I can't do all this by myself. I see
Yeah.
people. I was talking to one of my real estate broker friends, and he and his associate broker are basically it. And I said, "You literally are stuck, and you're going to burn out." And it's his mindset. I was like, "You literally could double your income with one person that you brought on, but you are buried right now." And that's what I realized pretty not well, kind of fast, but it took about 5 years for me to go, okay, I'm going all in
Yeah.
and started bringing things like there people try to get things so fast and there's this impatience, especially young guys. Like we want everything yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's like
I
I've
can
done this
relate.
in really yeah, no, for sure. Like it's a common thing. And it's like going into a relationship. Oh my gosh, she's beautiful. I'm in love. And like I want to marry her and I want to make love to her. And you met 14 seconds ago.
Yeah.
And there's this impatience. And part of this is calming yourselves down. And so I've been doing martial arts for a long time, and the core of every martial arts and yoga and everything is breathing. And that's the same thing with life. There's a great book by George Leonard called Mastery, and everything comes down to breathing. So in business and life, martial arts, it's all the same thing. If you can be present, you can be powerful. If you're not present, you're screwed. It's going to be chaos. And breathing, every time one of those things happen, just starting to breathe and focusing on that, it's amazing how much clarity you get in that moment. And I think all of us could use a lot more of that.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to touch on that too. It's funny you beat me to it twice because you have that mindset where it's your present. You're looking. You have an abundant mindset, right? Most people are living scars. And I was going to ask you because it takes either experience, a mentor, or books, education to get that mindset, right? Most people don't have it. Was the experience that helped you get this mindset, or mentors, or what was that?
Yeah, it was mostly the experience. I mean, I've read who knows 1,000, 2,000 books, so many personal development books. Every book from Tony Robbins to Zig Ziglar to Cialdini to like you name it, I've read them. I've read them multiple times. I've spent time with these people. The ultimate way you develop the mindset where it's part of your DNA is you go through that. There's a process. Like you can go to a Tony Robbins seminar and love Tony, but your life isn't going to change in a day or 2 days at a seminar when you beat your chest. Like you got to go do the work. And that's the problem. Most people are like, I don't want to do the work. I just want the money. And I actually had a mentor friend of mine years ago, and he's like, I don't want the houses. It was a real estate thing. He said, I don't want the houses. Actually, he said it like this: I don't want the houses. I just want the money. And at the time, it seemed very cool. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
me too. I'm 20 years old and I want to be a millionaire and blah, blah, blah. And then looking back, I was like, that's such a superficial bullshit type of perspective. Like if you're not doing something to serve people,
No.
the money is going to come and go if it comes at all. And so that was one of the big shifts. And you have to go through whatever your process is to learn that. You're not going to just read that in a book. And I can tell you one of the things that's a big mistake. You cannot just will this crap. Like if you watch The Secret or one of these things where somebody says, just think real hard and go out there and scream into the wind or say you're a money magnet, that doesn't
Yeah.
work, dude. You
Yeah.
got to go out there and hustle your ass off with the right mindset. And then it'll become you. The mindset becomes a body set and it's a soul set. Like all these things are set in, they become a part of your DNA and your cells, and then they all work together.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that because it's a combination of everything too. Like you said, it's hard work, but at the same time, that mindset, that belief, and that vision that you're gonna get there, and hard work and patience. Patience. That's a big part too, because I could relate what you just said there right there. When I first started off, I was like, oh my God, when am I gonna make my first $100,000? When am I gonna close my first deal? And it took months, man, at times. And then you build momentum and things start getting better, but you got to take a step back. Now, you said you do martial arts and yoga, and I feel like that helps. I do yoga a lot. I typically do yoga every morning because it settles me. It grounds me, and then I do the I don't know if you're familiar with Wim Hof method. I
Oh
do
yeah.
that right after, and I think it's so great. It starts my day perfectly, and it helps me stay positive. It helps me project my day a little better, and and yeah, all around it's a great benefit to control your breathe work and do yoga and all that.
Yeah, I think that everybody on planet Earth would benefit from what you described, like your ritual. There's nobody that could tell me how yoga and breathing and meditation and learning how to breathe would not benefit them as a daily practice. In fact, people are trying to find their way. People ask me all the time, what kind of martial arts should I do or should my kids do? And I'm like, I don't. I mean, whatever resonates with you. The thing about that's interesting about yoga is there's no downside with yoga at all
Yeah.
for anybody. It all it does is open you up and it allows you to ground and be present. So tell me one way that that's not positive for every human being in the world. So I love that. I mean, the martial arts, like I created a martial art called Yokido. It's a blend of yoga and Aikido and Reiki. So it's about healing people in the process of deflecting and moving energy around. So I did that because it's a natural evolution. And I think one of the things that we can do over time is start to pay attention to what's naturally bubbling up in the beginning, meaning like when you're 20 years old, you're not going to know. Like it takes years for you to be in your life.
Yeah.
And then things will start happening. Like nobody says, I'm going to create a martial art when they start. You just
Yeah.
train for 20 years. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is actually different. What is this? And then you name it. It's like, I have a child I didn't know about and I'm going to name it at 20 years old. So it's like, that's how Yokido came to be. And it was really just a reflection of how I operated in life.
Wow. And wow, so that's interesting. I read it on your bio, and I wanted to ask on it too. So it's you do yoga, but at the same time you're training. Can you elaborate a little bit on it? I'm pretty interested in it.
Yeah. So what happens is like I spent all this time and thousands of hours training in martial arts, tens of thousands of hours in martial arts, and then yoga followed up, and I was doing that thousands of hours of yoga practice, and they started merging, and I was watching and observing, and this is one of the interesting things when you can start observing yourself, where
Yeah.
you're actually watching and hearing and experiencing you as like outside your body. And so I was watching and I was like, oh, there's actually something happening here. And then I started studying Reiki, and then I realized in the way that I do martial arts and Aikido is it's about releasing tension, which is very much a yogic practice. It's
Yeah.
releasing tension constantly. But most people don't do that in martial arts. You think about whether it's UFC or Taekwondo or karate or most of the things that we see on television, you never see Aikido unless you watch Steven Seagal, and you barely see it because it's basically invisible.
Yeah.
With martial arts, there's so much tension. And so people are used to tension everywhere. And so the practice of a martial art where you're releasing tension, you become invisible, And then the conflict that's in front of you, whether it's on a business call or in a street fight, you start healing the adversary and it calms everything down. And then everybody walks away in a better place, a better space, a better energy, healthier. And all of a sudden people are like, what is happening? And that's a different
Oh,
way of looking at martial arts. It's
yeah.
not normal.
That's the first time I hear about it like that.
Yeah, it's because nobody ever does that. I mean, and
Yeah.
and that's what happens when you're a personal philosophy. Jim Rohn talked about this a lot before he passed away. Your personal philosophy. Well, what is it? And so Yokido represents my personal philosophy on how I see the world. It's about joining people in relationship, letting go of tension, feeling, because if you're tense, you can't feel anything, you can't see anything. It's like that you're gonna have a tunnel vision. And so if you let go of tension, people tend to respond with the same thing. They let go of tension and then you can start redirecting things based on a centered space, a centered energy. And if you're there and somebody's joining you, you can start putting intention into that healing process, which is where Reiki fits in. That process changes the world and brings peace to the world. And it may sound a little crazy, but the reality is it's something as simple as getting control of your breath and going into relationship without tension.
You see, and like it sounds crazy, but it doesn't. For most, it does. But for people that do it, it's not crazy. It's actually pretty straightforward and simple because you experience it every day. I do it every day for that reason. It's like
Yeah.
it keeps you centered, it keeps you on a great mood, it has you focused, clear, and everything. And one thing that you touched upon there that's interesting, right? It's like you said when you were doing the martial arts, you felt like you were watching yourself. I just finished reading the book, The Power of Now, and it talked about that, and it blew my mind away because it just makes you look at life a little differently when you just look at yourself as an like as so like you're looking at yourself how you think rather than trying to interrupt the thinking, if that makes sense.
Watching your thoughts
Yeah.
and understanding by observing your thoughts. Most people, you're exactly right, they're too in the middle of it. It's like being in the middle of the fight and not even realizing what's happening. This is why mentors are so valuable because they can see it. It's why we have coaches. Like why every player of any sport always has a coach. Why? Because you can't see yourself swing or punch or kick or do anything. Like you're too doing it. And even if when you're observing, but you can do it with your thoughts when you practice that, and that's powerful. Like just really observing, huh,
Yeah.
interesting, and just being, it's there's this thing with light, whether it's a physical thing or it's a wave. And when one of the problems with seeing light or like these photons or like what these particles is, if you see them with a microscope, you actually interrupt them and you push them off in a different direction. So it's hard to see or to actually understand what's happening because you interrupt the actual truth of what's going on. So there's this it's almost this
Found.
crazy mind bending thing to think about your
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
wait, if I'm thinking about my thinking, am I changing my thinking in the process of thinking about it? So it'll make your brain explode thinking about this a little bit. And then here's how it happens: when you let go and you open space, and anything that comes at you, you say thank you, and you keep the space open. All of a sudden, you start observing your thinking, and that's the process of opening the space that changes everybody's lives.
Approach it with gratitude.
Approach everything. When you
Yeah.
have negative space, when you have negative thoughts, when you have dark thoughts, like sometimes I live in Alabama in the South, and people are shameful about so many things. There's so much judgment on ourselves in this area. And it's really sad because people are like, well, I shouldn't think that way. I shouldn't do this thing.
Yeah.
There's all these rules for how we're supposed to be. And here's a different way of looking at it. When something comes at you, instead of saying, oh, I can't think that, that's a bad thought, you say, okay, thank you, and you take all the energy away from the thing, and it's like okay, and then it passes through, and instead of becoming a bad person, it's like all this true judgment is doesn't help anybody with
Yeah.
anything. So that gratitude definitely opens space.
Yeah. Now this feels like a coaching call, and I want to touch on something really quick because it got my attention there. Because you said it, say thank you, right? So, for example, let's say instead of it being something, let's say you start. Well, everybody has negative thoughts. Everybody has limiting thoughts. We're trying to get past them and to continue and grow and push to the next level. But let's say somebody has a limiting belief where it's like every time they're doing well, right? A thought pops up and it's like, hey, like you're gonna screw it up somehow, some way. You're gonna find a way. In that moment, you say, hey, thank you for that thought, and just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, so there's a couple of approaches. So gratitude may be saying thank you, and it may say, interesting, I'm curious to know what this is.
Okay.
And so there's openness, there's an open heart around these things. And so sometimes it's thanking it, and sometimes it's just being open to it. Because what happens is when we have things come up, it's usually a call. The
Yeah.
Course in Miracles really goes into this, and it's everything in life is either an act of love or a call for love. There's no exception. So when these things are coming out, part of this is a call to be heard. Like, what is this thing that's coming up? And it might be from your past, it might be trauma, it might be something. And so being open to whatever that is, and then there's probably something to learn from it too. Like,
Yeah.
okay, instead of fighting it. So being in a fight doesn't really help anything.
Yeah.
Being open, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, got it. And then it's done. And that's what can change everything when you actually find completion with things.
Yeah. Yeah. I was listening to Tony Robbins yesterday, and he hit home where it's like you got to ask the right questions, right? Because instead of asking why me, why does this continue happening, and be like, okay, why is this happening, and how can I make it better, right? So asking those right questions and having that right mindset, and it's crucial. I agree.
Along the lines of the questions, and everybody should stop whatever you're doing and write this one down if you don't do this all the time. And the question when things happen, we go, why is this happening to me? Why is this hurricane happening? Why did so and so get raped or killed, or like all these traumatic things? And a super empowering question that I love asking is, why is this happening for me?
Why is this happening for me? I love that.
There's
Life.
this beautiful lesson embedded in everything. And the reality is, we may not be able to control a hurricane, but we can absolutely control our interpretation and our response to it. And when you ask, why is this happening for me? Boom, all of a sudden the abundance starts showing up, because that question opens things versus shuts it down. Happening to me turns you into a victim, and then you're just defending. And being a victim doesn't get you anywhere except in the same place, stuck in a hole.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Life happens for you, not to you. That's how it goes. Damion, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope I want to have a second episode with you, because I feel like we have so much more to talk about. But we are in a short time right now. Where can my audience find you? What's your social media and website?
Best place to check out anything I'm doing with the retirement stuff is eQRP.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect personally with me, love to do that. And if you're like, you know what, either me or my spouse or my parents are, gosh, they're going down, like you mentioned your parents. There is power in opening space with education. And so get a copy of the QRP book that's on my site. So eQRP.com, get a copy of the book, and maybe for you, maybe for somebody else. But the reality is you got to take a step. And this is the action step to take to start that ball rolling, to really unshackling yourself and no longer being subject to Wall Street's financial shackles.
Yeah, yeah, which is very important. And guys, these will be on the notes. Damion, thank you once again. Guys, share the show. People need to learn about him and learn about what he's doing. It's going to help a lot of people. Thank you again, Damion.
Thank you so much.